Thanks so much to all my patrons. Join now to help support the channel and help pick the books I review on this channel. Link in the description.
And I am done. Okay, so I just got done listening to Avempartha. This is the second book in the Riyria Revelations by Michael J. Sullivan, and I want to give you my unedited thoughts on finishing this book, which was literally just right now. So, yeah, not a fan. I did not like pretty much anything about this book. I'm going to give it a 2 stars out of 5, which means I did not like it. And yeah, I'm frustrated by this book and the series, and I'm done with it. I read this series relatively early on in me kind of getting back into fantasy a few years ago before I started this channel. And I recall liking the series a lot. Some of the books I loved, including this one, the first time I read it. Some I thought were okay. But in general, my feelings about the series were extremely high. Now, this series is split up in a very interesting way, going kind of backwards. So the first series that was written is the most recent in the timeline. It's a series about these two characters, Hadrian and Royce. Hadrian is like a badass warrior, and Royce is like this scout assassin type character. And they've known each other for a long time as the series goes along, and there is a long narrative arc that doesn't totally make sense at this point in the story after the second book, but I think it's like 6 books long, and you start kind of piecing it together as it goes along. But they're kind of billed as like one-off books that are set within a wider series. The next series after that is this prequel series about how they met and their adventures going along. Really short, kind of fun little adventure stories. And then it goes even further back, thousands of years ago, to show like the origins of this world. And then the next series goes like in between those 2 time periods. I felt like each of these series got worse as they went along. And so I wanted to go do a reread of my favorite one, the one I had so many positive memories of. And yeah, it's just, I read the first one and I didn't like it. And I'm now reading the second one, and I think ultimately I liked it even less. And it's rough doing that to yourself sometimes, especially when you go in with these high expectations. And I have to really do some like reflection about what is different this time, because the book didn't change. The format that I listened to it did. Now, I did audiobook the first time. The audiobook I listened to was by, I always forget the guy's name. It's the guy that also does the 5 Warrior Angels. He's done a ton of stuff, and I really enjoyed his narration. The second time I'm doing this on the graphic audio version, which is like one voice actor per character, and it's more like a play in audio form with some sounds and music in the background. In general, I really enjoy the graphic audio versions of books more than I would the other way around. And so I don't think that it's the audio format that I'm listening to it that I'm disliking this. It's the content. So then I have to be like, what's different about me that's not connecting with the content? And I think ultimately what happened is when I was first getting back into fantasy, I didn't have a lot to compare my reads to. And because of that, I think I liked books more than I otherwise would have. And it made me feel like, oh, I've never read anything like this before. This is a fun little adventure story. The writing is good. The plot's good. All these things are new and fresh. And overall, I could walk away with a really positive impression. But now, all of those things are different. You know, nothing is fresh about this. It's, it's something that's been done a million times. It's that, total classic fantasy world with elves and dwarves and basic Lord of the Rings type stuff that's been done a trillion times. The writing style is pretty basic. I don't know about basic, pretty average. So nothing to like write home about. I'm not going to like listen to this book and be like, wow, that is really, really incredible writing. That doesn't pop off. The characters feel pretty one-dimensional, when the first time it didn't feel that way. And I think I've just come to learn what I like out of characters and the different types of depth that I like out of characters. I'm not sure if it's like a criticism on the author themselves or more of just me and what I like. I lean a little bit more towards a criticism towards the book itself, because when I compare it to a lot of other reads, it feels way more shallow on the character front. The world building feels, and this is weird for me to say, and maybe this is something that I'm having a problem with an audiobook, and I would have a better luck on this doing a physical book, which I've never done in this. But the world building felt almost too complex. It was not hard to follow. It's just it talks about too many things that aren't super relevant to the story, and trying to make you feel alive in this world when this world doesn't feel that unique. The politics of this world is unique to the book, but nothing. It all feels like that, English countryside kind of vibe, that medieval sort of thing, the Lord of the Rings tone to it. But then it goes into this great depth about the different people that are running the world and how they're trying to fight against each other. But the characters that we're with don't really get to encounter that too much. And so it just feels like flavor for the sake of putting flavor into it, if that makes sense. And so that didn't really vibe with me super well either. So what I'm left with, is something where it's like, is the magic system really cool? Is like the magic of the world really interesting? And no, it's, pretty bland stuff. I know that there is some interesting, I think, magical kind of revelations that happen later on down the story. But even now, when I first listened to them, I was like, oh, those were really cool. In the twists and the revelations are awesome. But now, is it because I already know them, or know most of them? I've forgotten some of them, or is it just that it doesn't feel that special? And I think it's the special one. And that's unfortunate. And I wish so badly that I was kind of back in that mindset of where I was when I first started reading fantasy, where everything impressed me. But I think that's just a byproduct of reading hundreds and hundreds of things, and you get a little pickier and you find out what you're really into. And when you really find those special stories that really click with you, it makes other things feel worse in comparison, even though they might not be bad themselves on their own. So a lot of personal preference stuff. But yeah, so when I read the first one, I was like, my ultimate criticism was, I enjoyed the stuff with Hadrian and Royce. I enjoyed their little adventure, but there was far too much time dealt with the politics. There was far too much time dealt with other characters that I know are not incredibly relevant to this overall story of this world. But I kept having this imagery that the second book would solve that problem. The second book would focus on Hadrian and Royce and tell their story, because for some reason that's what I remembered. I remembered their story so vividly, and I forgot all the other stuff is ultimately what happened. Because there was a lot of the other stuff, and it was very forgettable, and that's not a good thing. And so nothing was better about this one than the first one. In fact, I think that I enjoyed this one even less. There was... The ultimate hook to this story is this fight against an ancient dragon type creature, but the way they solve the problems in this feels so silly, for lack of a better term. They're trying to solve how to get to this little island, for example, and they're busting their heads over it. And how are we going to do this? And inside, I even forgot how they got into the little island, and it's like, oh, obviously it's this. And I think if you just read a bunch of fantasy stuff, it's like that stuff is kind of easy to connect with. And when it does, and you're supposed to be like, oh, wow, that's really great writing. Oh, wow, that's such a cool little, you're so smart. And it's like, no, it should have been obvious to the characters. The characters are dumb because they aren't able to kind of think their way through these things. Not, impressive that there was some special thing being done here. So yeah, I really wanted to go through this whole series, these 6 books, and I'm so bummed because I want to find audiobooks that I love. Sometimes I'm in love with audiobooks, and I find that, listening to them would be far superior to reading them. Things like Dungeon Crawler Carl, things like The First Law, apparently things like The Wandering Inn, which I found out recently. But sometimes... It's hard for me to find good audiobooks and good series. Like my physical book TBR is multiple times longer than my audiobook TBR, because in my audiobooks I need them to be a little more direct and straightforward and not so complex with a million characters, and a little easier to follow. And it's hard to find fantasy books like that. So I thought I had it, and there's 6 books I can add on, and I can add, another month or 2 to my TBR. and just ultimately it's just a big dud. So I'm going to have to scrap the 4 books that I was planning on reading in this and start substituting some more in there. So ultimately, like, do I recommend this book to people? I still think, like, I do. It's just, I think I'm a little pickier about what kind of people I recommend it to. I'm certainly not going to recommend it to, like, fantasy veterans, in part because I think a lot of fantasy veterans probably already have read this, and in part because, you know, the only fantasy veterans that I would recommend this to are the ones that tell me that they're into these kind of, you know, basic kind of buddy adventure stories. I certainly would recommend this book to people kind of getting into fantasy that haven't read a ton of it. I feel like it can feel very new and fresh and fun, and so I'll still say that, I'll still do that, and so I feel weird giving this book like a 2-star ranking because, you know, I don't know if it ultimately deserves it, but my star system is not, you know, how good is a book. And I think that's unfair to authors a little bit, but look, this is my hobby channel, and this isn't like a job. I'm doing what I want out of this, and what I want in my rankings is just show you if I liked the book or not. I'm not some professional. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just a guy telling you what I think about books. And so I didn't like this. I did like it the first time. Take that for what it is. First read, you know, I don't know, 4 stars, 4.5 stars. Second read, 2. Just the way it is sometimes, right? So don't let it dissuade you too much. Think about what I've said, and if that appeals to you, then go for it. You know, and certainly I would never judge anybody for like liking this. I liked it at one time, you know, so, you know, maybe you will too. So check it out if that kind of thing appeals to you. But if you've read a lot of fantasy and you want something that, and you kind of know that the kind of stuff you like, and it's not this kind of basic turn off your brain kind of adventure story, then yeah, just look elsewhere. And because there's a million fantasy books out there, and got to find the stuff that's there for you. So that's it for me. Thank you so much for watching this review, and as always, happy reading to you. Thanks again to all my patrons, with a special shout out to my Ascendant tier and Librarian tier patrons: Amy, Anna G, CJ, Doust, Darren, JD, Jonathan, Nathan T, Nev's Book Channel, Orthodoxia, Ron Reich, Russell, Ryan L, Slay, Sydney Baker, Tahir, Zion, Anna, Andra, Blair, Brock, Evan, Harry W, Joe UK, Kat Mick, Michael Sugarman, Sky, and Tyler. Thanks for sticking to the end of this video, and if you want to watch some more content from my channel, click over here and I've got some good videos for you. Thanks so much.